Welcome to Roar Like the Lamb. This is Paola Pena and poor, sickly Father Sam, who's joining
Poor,
us
sickly Father Sam.
from another point on campus.
Look, normally we're seated about 8 inches from one another, and I thought this might be a safer way to do this so that you don't get whatever this cold is that I have. I just felt like it was the right thing to do.
Just totally sounds like Christian charity. Thank you.
Yes, exactly. Christian charity. Wow.
Trying to bring back your COVID talks.
COVID talks. Ugh. I don't want to talk about COVID.
So you don't have COVID, you just have the flu or
No,
a
I don't
cold.
have the flu. I just have a cold.
Cold.
It's nothing serious. Just a cold.
No need to worry.
No, it's just a cold, but it's visible and noticeable enough that it would be rude for me to sit within a foot of you. And then people would be like, why are they recording together? He's definitely breathing his germs all over her, and that's gross. So it just seems like this is the better thing to do. This also gets me out of going to a meeting that I actually really want to go to. So I'm gonna FaceTime into the meeting.
One that you actually want to go to?
Yeah, no, I really want to be at this meeting, and I mean that. I'm not.
I know you mean that. That's why I said it. I was like, oh, you want to go to this one?
Yeah, I have to be at a meeting later this afternoon, and I want to be there, and I can't because this would it would be rude to show up like this to a meeting. So I'm gonna FaceTime in instead and participate remotely.
Cool beans.
Yeah, it's not my ideal, but it's the way to go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we got I know I told you this earlier, but I want to give a shout out to Linda McLean as we begin this episode.
All right.
Linda, you brought so much joy.
I don't think you understand, Linda. So much joy.
So much joy.
I wasn't even part of it, but so much joy. She was so excited to tell me about this.
I was like, oh my gosh, I get to tell Father Sam now. So for all of you who don't know Linda and don't know the accounts of what happened, this past weekend, I went on retreat with the Sisters of Life, and it was great. It was silence for 3 days. It's exactly what I needed. I was just like in my happy place. So at the end of it, we broke silence right after Mass on Sunday. And after we finished brunch, I was talking to my friend Katie and Val, who also went on retreat, and we were just kind of trying to chat a little bit about how the weekend was. And Linda comes up to me. Now, I never met Linda. I didn't know her up until this point, but I loved how she introduced herself. She tapped me on the arm and she was like, "Are you Paola?" And I was like, "Yeah." She goes, "Oh, hi, I'm Linda, one of your tens of listeners." And
Tens of
I
listeners. Yes.
lost it. Katie, obviously a fan of our show, she is halfway to the ground cackling. I'm trying to catch my breath. It's like a good, I think, solid 2 to 3 minutes of us just really cackling and laughing hard because oh my gosh, this is what our fans are going to be known as.
What this means is that we have created a thing. We've said something that has caught on. People respond to it. I'm thrilled. I think that's wonderful.
Oh, it's amazing.
Linda, thank you for listening.
It is. And I told her, you're going to get a shout out the next time we do this.
Right on.
And so it is a very well-deserved shout out. It is the most amazing thing. Thank you, Linda. Thank you for being one of our tens of listeners.
Awesome.
Yeah. So, yeah, that was that. So today I wanted to actually share something that I learned on retreat, which I thought would be really interesting. So
what was the theme of the retreat?
Oh, it was good. It was Eucharistic love. So in line with the Eucharistic revival happening through
awesome.
It's just particular to the United States, right? Like the mission.
This is something that the U.S. bishops have called for the entire country. A sense of that Eucharistic revival and renewal.
Yeah, it was amazing. Just the different talks and all that gearing up to just really allowing yourself to be transformed, the reality that the Lord has come into our world and that he truly does like impact it and change it. And one of the things that stuck out to me, I ended up sharing it last night at a small group meeting. was this idea of like God's vastness of creation and how creation itself communicates and manifests the goodness of God, so that, we who are God's own creation, his creatures, we share in that goodness. And how in the Catechism, this is in 294, it says that it communicates God's glory, but also invites us into our beatitude. And I was like, wait, that's kind of fascinating how like creation is also for us, it's for our goodness, for our joy, for our beatitude. And that little part kind of stuck out to me, like our beatitude. So I wanted to know, Father Sam, if you could just like explain what beatitude is, because I didn't actually look this up.
Yeah.
So I was just reading it from the Catechism, but that last part, what does it mean that our beatitude? What's that supposed to signify for us? Yeah, just kind of like walking with God in this world that he created for our good.
Yeah.
Um,
Uh, well, I like how you're kind of focusing on the like we share in that goodness. And so it becomes this like personal identity, right? In the vastness of creation, we're created good also. And so first there's that just recognition of the goodness of creation, therefore our own goodness, the goodness of ourselves, of our humanity, the goodness of everything about us. That's great. This kind of reminds me, remember we had that conversation we were talking about creation and sort of that
mm-hmm,
that sense of like I'm so loved in the midst of all this great creation. Here I am, but I know that God loves me personally. And I was telling you about how I look at it kind of from a different perspective, and I look out and I see the creation and I go, this is all for me.
mm-hmm,
Right? There's the sense of the creation is God's gift to us as well.
mm-hmm,
Right? So when we're talking about beatitude is blessedness meaning our holiness. So
mm-hmm,
all of creation is here too to help us to grow in holiness, to help us to grow in our reverence for God, our love for God. And when we love God, that's when we're truly blessed. That's when we're truly happy.
mm-hmm,
Right? So the beatific vision, that means we're seeing God face to face. Well, until we're actually there, taken out of this world, until this time that we have on earth passes, we don't have the beatific vision. But the grandeur of creation gives us that little glimpse at what the beatific vision will be like. It gives us the chance to see something of what God is doing, something of what our future is.
mm-hmm,
So you look out at the glory of creation, and what are you going to see? You're going to see this is this is some sliver of what heaven will be like. And so as it's a reminder of heaven, a reminder of God's goodness, then it contributes to our beatitude, to our overall growth and holiness.
mm-hmm. That's so cool.
Isn't it great?
It's so beautiful because so she shared a story. One of the sisters gave a talk and she gave all these like scientific facts. And I was like, wow, you were definitely a nerd in college. And so I think she studied biology or something. And she started sharing things about the universe. I had no idea that there are 57 galaxies. And
That
I
we
was like,
know of.
right, okay, well, that's a good point that we know of, 57 galaxies that we know of. And she said that there's so many stars. There's so many stars that we have in heaven. But then she started talking about sand. And I was like, why are we talking about sand? So the study was done that if you were to take a handful of sand into your hand, you roughly have about 10,000 grains of sand in there. Now, if you were to combine all the sand on planet Earth into one, it would not even equal the amount of stars in the sky, which puts into perspective what God spoke to Abraham when he was making covenant with him, that I will make your descendants as far and as numerous as the stars in the sky.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa, wait, that's amazing, because God isn't just simply saying, I'm going to give you a bunch of people that are going to follow. God's saying like, this is also my promises are infinite. Like these are
Right.
my promises to you. Like when you look up in the sky, not to simply remember that, but remember God has infinite promises for us. But then you take it to a galactic level and you're like, oh my goodness, this infinite God has infinite promises for me and wants me to experience him infinitely for eternity. How it's all like coming into that. And To bring it back down to the Eucharist, how Jesus in creation, like he came into this world to assume our humanity, to reveal the face of the Father, and still continues to communicate to us in and through the Eucharist. Um, he's still communicating his goodness. He's still manifesting his glory in the Eucharist. And such a powerful thing to think about, in that it should lead to a transformation, a more deeper sense of wonder, for an infinite God who's just trying to constantly love us.
Yeah, but so think about that concept of infinity, right?
Mm-hmm.
God is infinite, and if I can pick up a handful of sand and there's 10,000 grains of sand there, and all the grains of sand in the world are not equal to the number of stars that there are in all the 57 galaxies that we know of, and all the stars, of course, that we can't see because they're beyond our sight, right? They're so far away. Um, that infinity can get to be too much for us, right? So
Mm-hmm.
imagine Abraham going out and looking up at the stars. And remember that when Abraham is going out to look up at the stars, this is long before there's such a thing as light pollution.
Mm.
So when you go to a place that's more rural, you go out to like the middle of nowhere and you look up at night and you see the stars, it's because there's no light pollution that you can
It's
see
the
all the
best.
stars.
It's the
It's
best.
amazing. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
gorgeous. But as you go out to that place where you can see all the stars, the beauty of it and the number it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we can get overwhelmed by infinity,
Mm.
by the fact that all of this stuff is beyond us. So you're looking out at the stars, you're looking out at the ocean. If you're on a boat out on the open ocean and you just look out, it's just water everywhere, right? Um, Go to the mountains and look out from the mountains and you just see tree after tree after tree after tree. You see just the forest laid out before you, and it's all too much. It's
Mm.
more than we can handle.
Mm-hmm.
And yet what we're talking about here, that idea of the infinite blessings that God has for us, the infinite way in which he has promised us goodness. So then both the Eucharist and the incarnation are a really big deal for us. So the Eucharist, because we can receive the Eucharist again, because we can come and be in the presence of Jesus in the Eucharist again and again and again, right? But the Eucharist is also very tangible. And so the idea that the infinite God, who's
Mm.
already joined himself, his divinity, to our humanity in the incarnation. The second person of the Blessed Trinity becomes man, joins himself to our humanity. Then, from there, we get to this idea of the Eucharist and this gift that Jesus gives to us. This is my body. This is my blood. Take it and eat it. Like, I'm going to make myself and all my infinite graces and blessings finite enough for you to consume. That's what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And isn't that incredible? Like, here's everything. Here's everything that I am, everything that I have. Here, it's all yours in a way that you can receive. So infinity would overwhelm us.
Yeah.
The infinity of God, the vastness of God, the vastness of the universe would overwhelm us. But instead,
Right.
he says, no, I'm going to make this something that you can see and understand.
Yeah. That's
So he
why.
takes on our human flesh. He enters our human condition. He gives us the Eucharist so that we can be united with him really and truly.
Mm-hmm. Remember how those that new NASA telescope had come out with these beautiful images
Yeah.
of like the edges
Is
of.
it James Webb?
Yes, I think
Yeah.
so. So I was talking about it with my small group, and somebody brought up like how, yeah, those pictures led people into like this crazy existential like moment for themselves. That if you didn't have a concept of God, you were freaking scared. You were overwhelmed by the beauty, but all of a sudden you were like, whoa, wait a second. They became so aware of their littleness, but also what if there is something more? So it was amazing how that brought somebody to understand their own existence and the possible existence of there just being more. Um, we then talked about just how Jesus heals. So because we have a God who's constantly communicating His goodness, has all these promises for us, and why do we always turn away from His promises, or why do we begin to doubt? And we were reading this particular story of, I think there was like the young paralytic, and uh, his friends, yeah, his friends had come in and said, like, "Oh, you like your faith actually changed this man's life." So because of that, Jesus saw their faith. He moved on, and then there were people questioning him, and he said to them, why do you ask yourself such questions, kind of like questions of doubt?" And that line kind of stuck out to me, because what I heard Jesus saying to me in that moment, He goes, "Why do you even entertain the lies in your heart?
Yeah.
Why do you even?" He's not just saying like, "Why do you ask those questions?" He's like, "Why are you in dialogue with these lies that prevent you from having a faith that leads to miracles?" And it really struck out. And what was interesting is I heard Jesus lovingly telling me this. Why are you even engaging with this? And it was interesting how somebody else in the other group said, "Well, that's so interesting. You hear Jesus calling you lovingly and kind of telling you, hey, hey, don't do that." I hear him kind of yelling at me. And I was like, "Oh, wait." I was
Wait,
like,
so why is Jesus yelling at you again?
not having enough faith.
Oh, so okay,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
not like the only way he's going to get your attention is if he yells really loud because you're so distracted by other things.
I
That's
mean,
why he's got to yell. Or
yeah.
is he like, Paola, I told you
So,
this. Like, is
well,
it like a yelling from disappointment in the
no,
fact that
like
you aren't
the way
perfect?
that I received it, and like I think this is more or less when I think about my experiences with God, and when He's going to correct, He always corrects with such love. He's very firm on what it is that He's asking and telling me, or making me aware of what I need to know, and it's never with a like a twinge of condemnation. It's just like it's almost as He's saying what He's telling me, it's also communicating that there's more. So it kind of leaves me with a sense of hope, like, okay, I'm not doing what it is that you're asking, but the way that you're speaking me is leading to believe that you have more prepared for me, um, that I can't attain because I'm stuck over here, whether it's in a space of doubt or a space of sin, and you want to heal that from me.
Yeah.
um that Yeah, so just this whole weekend was such a reflection, like, God's promises are as numerous as the stars in the skies. That's amazing. Dang, I can't stand that I'm always forgetting that. But He will never stop showing up to remind me. So I realize that there's less stress. I don't want to say less stress, but the more that I walk the Christian life, maybe this is the way to put it, and let me know if I'm wrong. I feel like I'm less self-critical,
Okay.
because the more that I experience God's mercy, the more that's what actually moves me into a transformed life. And how I can sometimes be harder on myself and completely forget that God is delighting in me.
Okay. Yeah, I'm with you. So if we're talking about being self-critical in the negative way of speaking
In
about
the negative
self-critical,
way, yeah,
right?
negative way.
So negatively meaning that you're constantly criticizing yourself, or just kind of living in a place where you disapprove of your own decisions, your own actions, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So that's the self-critical way of being. That is always kind of thinking that I'm wrong, I'm bad somehow. Now there's
Yeah.
positive self-critical, right?
Mm-hmm.
So to be self-critical in a positive way is to recognize I'm not perfect and I want to do better.
Mm-hmm.
So how can I improve? It's the reasonable and healthy sort of self-awareness that allows you to critique yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that's not what we're talking about. We're usually most often when we're talking about that, it's the negative way of being self-critical, which is to take something and overdo it.
Mhm.
to really go beyond what is reasonable for it.
Mhm.
Okay, so if that's the if you're in that place where you're going to be less self-critical, then we're looking to the God, like you said, keeps reminding you, right? Keeps reminding you of that truth of who he is. The God who keeps reminding you of the reality of the promise that's been made. But isn't that the whole Bible?
Literally.
It's the whole Bible. This is where the news is so good for us, though,
Mhm.
because in all of this, what we're seeing is this, because your experience, Paula, is very much, I think, everybody's experience. It's
Mhm.
mine for sure. To
Mhm.
say I forget too easily that God has given me so many things so consistently. God's blessing has been there. He has seen me through all these different things so many times. But what do? It's so easy to forget. It's so easy to get caught up in other things and
Mhm.
to complain, to wish that things were different. It's so easy to forget the promise,
Mhm.
right? And so to feel like every little challenge or even the big challenges are just too much.
Mhm.
But that's the whole of scripture. Like from Abraham on, you see God revealing. I mean, especially from Abraham on. I shouldn't say only from Abraham on, but especially from Abraham on, because
Yeah.
remember Abraham is in Genesis, so we are
We're
going back
starting at the
really to the
beginning.
very beginning of the Bible. But you know, like I guess we could, yeah, let's go all the way back to Adam and Eve, right? They forget that forget isn't really the right word, but they ignore the promise, the gift
Mm.
that they have right in front of them that they're actually
Mhm.
living in. It's so easy. And so when we see our own failure to remember, we see our own failure to be faithful to the promise that God has made. We see our own inability to recognize God present in some way. Take comfort because all we have to do is look back at the whole story of our salvation, the entire Bible, and we're going to see time and time and time again the story of the people who forgot
Mhm.
or who got caught up in other stuff. And because they got caught up in these other things, they weren't really united with God. And yet, does God ever leave his people?
No.
No.
That's the crazy
Again and
part.
again. Yeah, this is the God who keeps coming back to his people, who keeps calling them back, who keeps sending the prophets, who keeps just constantly raising his people up.
Oh gosh, I just had a thought that is totally not right. But I can't say it.
Maybe that's better. Let's do some church
Yes.
history here for a
Okay, let's
second
do church
because
history because I was like, no, yeah, no, let's not do that. I'll tell
so
you in private, and then you're like, yeah,
that's
I'm
good.
really glad you didn't
That's
say
good.
that.
Yeah, that's good. So in the history of the church, there have been these different controversies, right? So especially in the early church during the time still of the Roman Empire and those early persecutions, um, there was a question about what would happen if someone had apostatized, meaning they left the
Mm,
church, and then wanted to come back.
mm,
So a Christian who, out of fear of martyrdom, out of fear of loss of personal freedom or loss of property or something like that, had renounced their faith and participated in the pagan rites, had sacrificed to the Roman gods or something like that. And then afterwards, after the persecution died down, wanted to come back to the church. What would happen? And this is a serious controversy in those early days. And so the question was, do they have to be rebaptized? Like, do we have to baptize them again? Um, or is it enough for them to do some penance and be reconciled? Like,
mm,
how do we bring people back when they've fallen away? And this actually helped the church to formulate her understanding of what baptism is, like the theological understanding of baptism,
mhm,
as well as an understanding of penance and the sacramental gift of God's mercy.
mm,
Right. So you'd have, do they need to be baptized again? Well, this is how the church comes to understand that baptism is a once in a lifetime thing, and that in baptism we're grafted onto the body of Christ. We're united to Christ powerfully. God comes to dwell within us. Even if I reject my faith at some point, I cannot erase the fact that I am a baptized person. That's made a mark on my soul. So this will give rise later on to like Thomas Aquinas talking about the ontological,
Mm-hmm.
ontological character and ontological mark. And it's not really just Thomas Aquinas, but Aquinas I think always brings up the ontology of the person, right? So in baptism, I am marked, and it's a permanent mark. So no matter what I do, I can't not be a baptized person. I could stop practicing the Catholic faith. I could renounce all kinds of things about what I believe, but I am a baptized person. That's it.
Mm.
And so as this question was coming up, what do we do with those who have abandoned the faith but now want to return? What do we do with them? How do we bring them back into the community? Well, they don't have to be baptized again because baptism is once and that's it. The effect of baptism endures. That they have abandoned their faith would be, we could call it grave sin, of course. It's something
Mm-hmm.
seriously wrong, but it would be unnecessary for them to be rebaptized. And so,
Mm.
I mean, this was actually a serious controversy in the life of the church.
How long was it argued for?
Um, this would have been, I can't think of the dates, but I'm pretty certain that this came up actually at some of the earlier councils of the church. Again, I'd have to go back and check the actual facts, but this was something that was very seriously debated back and forth. So this helps then the church to understand also the idea of penance and sacramental reconciliation, the idea of being reconciled to the church and being reconciled to God through the ministry of the church. That if you've fallen, if you have failed in some way in your faith, you can come back. And it's interesting because this is the I think this is something that the church continues to struggle with. Right?
Mm.
How do we balance that reality that God is just and tells us what to do, like tells us that this is something that we're supposed to do, gives us commandments.
Mm-hmm.
We've got to follow the commandments, like we're not excused from the law.
Yeah.
And yet we are a messy bunch of sinners that, that need God's mercy and grace. And that mercy and
Yeah.
grace is always available to us.
Yeah. Hmm. Well, I think the Sisters of Life do a great job of that.
Just in case we needed to plug the Sisters of Life a little bit more.
I mean, how
They're
can
so
you
good.
not?
They are so good. Truly.
Yeah. Because the way that, I mean, when you step in, you are just so, their maternity is so evident, the way they just receive you, the way they just receive your brokenness and your hurt. Even if you're far away, they're just so tender with you. Um, and how that's to get you to, drop the walls of your heart and
Yeah.
become more vulnerable in order to have that encounter with God. Like they make such a beautiful space for that. Um, you're not getting pummeled like from the side on a soapbox saying like you're gonna go to hell. Um, they do it so well. They live it, and it's such a tangible experience with them. So that is really that's interesting though. I like, hmm, that is very interesting because there are times though I leave God in my heart. Like, I can still be practicing, and then there's times when I'm really struggling and
Sure.
I'm just like, I don't trust you right now. Don't get
Yeah.
close. I'm mad
Yeah,
at
but
you.
that's all of us, right?
Yeah. Oh, it
We
totally
experience
is.
that. Yeah.
It's such a part of the spiritual life.
Yeah. I'm
And
not okay with it. I wish that it
no,
wasn't the case. I wish I didn't do that, but
literally,
I
literally.
know it happens. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so because of that, it's just I think every time I'm just so amazed at God's goodness to always call me back,
Yeah.
to always be there. So I've been watching seasons or episodes of The Chosen since I'm doing the Chosen Bible study here at St. Pius, and this past one, the fourth episode, whew, this was real good. You have Simon, who's literally about to get thrown into jail because he owes a bunch of debt. Then he tried to do some witty thing to get out of, paying taxes. It implicated close family members. He's like, oh my gosh, like I need to change that. So you see a man really through much of the first episode just like trying to come up with every resource available to him because he's also charismatic. He's pretty smart to try to get out of the mess that he's in. And he's impatient. He's upset with himself. He's grown distant with his wife and he's not being honest with her. And, he has to catch a bunch of fish. Matthew, the tax collector, comes to him and says, okay, well, now you have to owe this debt by tomorrow morning. So he thought he had a week to pay off his debt. And now it's like, well,
So-
if it doesn't, just, yeah.
I'm going to interrupt you right there. I'm sorry. Matthew is coming to Peter to collect the debt. Matthew, the tax collector,
Matthew, the tax collector,
is
yeah.
coming to Peter. This is in The Chosen.
This isn't The Chosen.
Okay, I've not seen it.
Oh, you haven't seen it?
No, but I think it's really cool because actually this is drawing a connection to. Have you ever seen Franco Zeffirelli's Jesus of Nazareth?
No.
So it's like one of those epic movies.
It's a
pretty
movie.
wild.
Okay, I thought it was a painting.
Yeah, no, it's Zeffirelli's Jesus of Nazareth. It's like Jesus with like.
Is this the one from the
eyes.
70s?
Yeah, he's got like deep blue eyes and he speaks with a British accent and it's great.
Totally
Jesus
Jesus.
had an English accent, right?
Yeah,
why not?
and he totally had blue eyes.
Yeah, definitely had blue eyes. But like intense steel blue eyes, like whoa. Yeah, you get lost in those eyes real easy. So in the scene where the people are all gathered around, it's at Peter's house. But Matthew comes in and Peter flips out that Matthew is coming to see Jesus. And anyway, at least that's how I remember it. It's been a long time since I've seen Zeffirelli. So sorry, continue. I'm sorry. I just thought it was cool that Peter and Matthew had kind of a conflict in
all these different forms of arts.
Epic, and now
in this new epic
too. Yeah.
Oh, that's so great. Yeah. So anyways, Matthew's telling him he's got to get his affairs in order. So he's like, you know what? Simon goes, I'm going to go out. I'm going to do what I know how to do that God called me to do. And I'm going to fish. So his plan is to fish all night. And he obviously catches nothing. And as he's fishing in the boat, I thought this was really interesting how they put this in the scene. Simon starts recounting salvation history, but he's complaining to God about God's lack of saving his people. So Simon goes, first it was the Egyptians, then we were a slave for them for 400 years, then you led us into the desert, to what promised land? Only to wander for another 40 years. So he just starts naming how God has rescued them, and then also naming each oppressor that has come to enslave them. And now we have the Romans. And what is this God that I am praying to? Are you even listening? Do you even care? And I really love that scene because he really did salvation history in like those 20 seconds. But he was being also like so real and honest about his frustration with God. He's recounting God's work. He's recounting God's promises, and he's recounting what God has already done. But now he finds himself personally in a very similar space where there's no way out. I have caught nothing. My wife is going to be left alone. And we know that anyone without a husband they're destitute, and it's really serious during this time. And what I loved what they did is, the morning comes, Jesus is there, gets into the boat, and tells him to go put out into the deep. And it's when we're at the end of our rope, because up until that point, he is trying to do everything himself. He's trying to control every situation that is out of control. So I'm going to depend on myself to get this done. And it's only until he's got nothing left that God can do what he needs to do. And I find that fascinating because when I look on my own life, I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah. The Lord respected my freedom of choice. So he allowed me to, just do things according to my own devices and my own resources. But all of that is just filled with frustration and patience and it's very impulsive, it's very hasty. And it's not until I surrender that God's like, now I can do what I need to do.
Yeah.
And then Simon gets a bunch of fish. So it's just, I think what I find interesting is how faith works in the midst of like deep, deep suffering, or when things are just going really, really bad.
Isn't it when we feel like we have the least amount of control over the things happening around us that we try to take control the most?
Yes.
We feel like
Mm-hmm.
we have no ability to control what's happening. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's precisely when we decide that we're going to do everything ourselves. Like, I can't control how this person behaves or what's going on here, so I'm just going to try to control everything else that I possibly can.
Exactly.
I'm gonna try to make everything work to my benefit, and it's a defense mechanism, right?
Mm-hmm.
I want to feel some sense of control, and we can do the same thing in our spiritual lives, where we start thinking like, hey, I've got all this stuff going on, and I feel very, very much like I'm not in control, or I'm looking at the world around me and I see how chaotic the world
Mm-hmm.
is, and I'm wondering, God, where are you in all of this? Well, just in case God isn't speaking to me, or just in case God's not paying attention, I better start to do things. I better start to make
Right.
sure that things are happening. And that spiritual disposition that puts us in that kind of a position to say, I'm going to try to do everything myself, we've got to really guard against. We've got to be really careful with. Part of the reason that we need things like you went on retreat, part of the reason that we need a retreat, or we need just the reminder, is that it's so easy. It's so easy to get into that place where I'm trying to control everything.
Yep.
We need to break out of that and instead remember what we really are, what we're really called to be, and how we're supposed to be living.
Mm-hmm.
So that when we have that invitation from God to surrender, just let me in. Let me take care of this for you. Because so often that's not what we're thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So often we're like, no, God, I've got to do this. You gave me this task. I've got to take care of it. It's like, no, just give me the chance. So that spiritual disposition that allows us to say, all right, I'm gonna trust that God is actually working, that God is really and truly in control.
Mm-hmm.
Powerful.
It's so powerful. You also live a little bit more peaceful in that space, but um,
Oh, more peaceful in that space? Absolutely.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. I was just thinking of a couple instances where that's happened. I'm like, man, I found myself saying this the other night. I was like, isn't it so interesting how impatient we are with God's patience?
Why are you so patient with me, God? It really annoys me that
Literally.
you're so patient.
Why are you not responding when I need you to be responding? Like, do you even care? Are you listening? Do you hear me crying out to you? Um, yeah, just that. Like, we get impatient with the patience of God, who knows more, who sees everything and is in control of everything. So for me, just kind of recognizing that this weekend, my own places of impatience,
Yeah.
like that's like, it's been my prayer, like, God, help me to be patient with your patience. Like, you know more, you see more, and here I am, like a just like an ant running around, just being busy, but for what? When all
Yeah.
you're asking me to do is just to sit still and take care of me. You're right. I think I decided that a yearly retreat is not enough for me. I really should be going twice a year, every 6 months.
It's a good plan.
Yeah. So somebody
Good plan.
recommended a couple of, like, there's some Ignatian-led retreats, silent retreats in Massachusetts. So I might go find one of those to kind of do one
Yeah.
in the springtime. But it it matters. If in our culture we constantly talk about making space to reset and to be reminded, I mean, the fact that the church says you should go on retreat at least once a year, um, it's great. Like, you reset once, like when you go to confession monthly, constantly going and receiving the Eucharist at Mass, and if daily Mass, if possible. Like, there's so many ways in which our church has set up these moments of being
Yeah.
reset. Um,
Well,
to
just so we're clear, that the church expects priests to go on retreat annually.
Oh,
Yeah, it's not a requirement for anybody else.
well, then it's highly suggested.
Right, right. It's certainly a good practice. No, uh, yeah, but in the the list of like the precepts of the church. It's not something
Oh,
that
it's only
everybody
for
has to do.
priests.
Yeah,
Oh,
priests are required canonically to go retreat annually.
wow.
Yeah, pretty cool.
That is really cool.
Yeah, but that
Yeah.
doesn't mean that others ought not do it. In fact, it's an extremely good spiritual practice to go
Mm,
and make a retreat, even if it's just a weekend retreat.
exactly.
Right? But you're talking about doing an Ignatian retreat in Massachusetts. St. Joseph's Retreat Center in Milton, Massachusetts, which is right outside of Boston, is a fantastic place. Highly recommend.
Perfect. Good to know. I'll write it
Highly
down.
recommend. I'll get you the information for it. It's a great place to go.
Hmm.
It is kind of interesting though, because when you're sitting in the chapel has basically one wall that's just windows. It's clear glass windows, so you're looking out, but it's also not far from Logan Airport. So
Oh,
as you're sitting in the chapel at the tabernacle praying, all of a sudden you just see jets flying over you, going into land or taking off and coming over you. So that's pretty wild.
it
It's a
definitely
great place
is.
though, and they walk you through the Ignatian exercises.
Oh, that's awesome.
So yeah, you can go and do an Ignatian retreat there.
Okay. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna do that. It's a
I
good
think you'd love it.
course. Oh yeah, I did it with a couple people this year already, but I'm like, I need to go on one
Yeah, to go and take the
just for
retreat.
myself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a very different thing to talk with somebody while they're on retreat,
Mm-hmm.
to offer somebody who's on retreat some spiritual direction or some advice, and it's great, but it's not the same as going on retreat yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And the two things are necessary, right? So it can be, especially when you're in a ministerial capacity, to direct somebody during
Mm-hmm.
retreat or to serve them while they're on retreat. Fantastic. But it's a very different thing to go and take that time for your own personal self-reflection, for that time to be with God, and to let God restore and renew and refresh everything
Mm-hmm.
that's going on in your heart. Take that time for yourself to be with God. It's beautiful.
Yeah. And it's because of that ministerial position that I'm in that I'm like, I'm realizing I need to do this more. Um, yeah. So much happens in just 6 months.
Oh yeah.
Like like I need to be recentered again. Like what happened? Or it goes so quickly you don't even notice.
Right.
So to really have those times in those places set in. So yeah, I think it would be a very prudent thing for me to do.
You'd love it.
Oh yeah, I know I will. I love silence. I wish the one that I was on was 5 days long.
Be
Yeah.
nice. All right. Hey, this was great. I'm sorry that I'm not sitting next to you doing this.
Well, I'm not. I don't want to get sick, so.
Paola's not sorry that I'm not there.
Nope, it's okay. It's all okay.
I just love how you and me say, I'm not. I'm sorry you're not there. I'm sorry I'm not there with you. I'm not sorry you're not here. Wow. Thanks, Paola.
I'm being honest.
Oh, I appreciate it. I'd rather have the honesty than the love.
Oh, then that's cool. I mean, it speaks to your sarcastic heart, so that's fine.
So much. Like, you spoke my language. And
Well, look at that. I
could
learned
never ask for
something.
anything else.
Wow. That's
I
impressive.
think that might be the first time you did sarcasm the right way.
Oh my gosh.
And you didn't even mean to. It happened by accident.
Wow.
I'm so proud of you.
I'm proud of me too. I gotta tell my family.
You don't need to tell everybody.
No, I do need to tell them because they are also the ones who are on the receiving end of when I try to be sarcastic and it just comes out really bad and they hate me for it. But I need to say, hey, I got this one right. So I could do this. But I'm just not going to try again with them because we all know that leads to a lot of like
Right,
discord.
exactly. Right.
Oh,
Well, thanks, Paola.
and thanks, Father Sam.
You have a great day.
You too.
I'm Father Sam Kachuba.
And I'm Paola Pena.
Thanks for listening to Roar Like the Lamb.